What to do, what to do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Alwell, and with me as always is my brother Jack Alwell. Jack, how you doing? And what are you drinking right there?
Doing quite well, Al. It's bright early in the morning. I got a matcha frappuccino here. And speaking of, you can get 20% off your Enter Matcha purchases with the link below. Yeah, but I'm getting extravagant with these matcha drinks. Yeah, I got basil, ginger, banana, a little bit of chocolate in this one. It's quite good.
That is the reason why I've changed you in my phone from Jack Brother to Matcha Man. So going forward, I think, Jack, what book are we reading today?
Today, this is the last book in this book season. This was your last pick by James Clear. We have Atomic Habits, the instant classic. I mean, you see this all over the place in Barnes and Noble, and over 10 million copies sold.
That is very impressive. That is a lot of copies.
Yeah.
Has your book sold 10 million copies?
My book is barely sold. Well, actually, no. Well, no, it has not sold 10 million. The Extra Gold Journal is lucky to get like two a month, but this is a very niche population.
Fair enough. So I guess, Jack, what were your first thoughts? What did you think?
I thought the book, even though it says it's 250 pages, there's a lot of blank pages and it's very easy to read. I tore through this book, and I thought it was just very captivating with the examples he gives on how certain people change their habits through different measuring tools and methods. I really liked it. I saw a lot of similarities actually to Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets, where you're focusing more on the process and not so much on the result. And for those that haven't heard of us talk of Annie Duke, she was the former poker player that brought up this idea of resulting, and which is how people tend to focus on the outcomes or results instead of on the decision making process. So those were my initial thoughts. I really like the book.
It's funny you bring up Thinking in Bets, because I was actually just thinking of that book the other day when, I mean, somewhat unrelated, but I was describing that. This is somewhat of a tangent, but I was talking about that in pickleball strategy. That someone was showing me film of a shot they were hitting, and they were getting a good result, but it was a terrible decision, and I had to bring that up to them. That you're getting away with making a bad decision because the competition you're playing is low.
The odds were not in their favor on this shot, you're saying?
Well, at the highest level, they wouldn't be. At that particular point, they were getting away with it. And I told them I thought it was a bad decision.
Okay.
But that is just, I guess, my opinion.
Okay.
But yeah, I would. Your assessment of this book, I would agree with. It was easy to get through. It was highly. He does a good job on focusing on. I feel like how to actually make changes, like not just like the benefits of making changes. Because I feel like a lot of people talk about like the benefits of changing all these habits, like what more you can get out of life if you just do X. You know, if you cut out, alcohol, like these are the benefits that you'll be able to glean from your life versus like how do you cut out alcohol types of scenarios. I guess what was the first the first thing you want to talk about with this? Also, Jack,
yep.
The lamp is sort of giving off a weird glare on the call. Yeah, that's better.
I guess why don't we start out with how he's portraying how people typically try to change habits. And he has this diagram in the book, how it's like outcomes on the outside and processes and identities in the middle. And so outcomes is what you get, processes are what you do, and the identity part is what you believe. And he's saying that most people focus on the outcomes and then the processes and then the identity instead of the other way around. And I guess, why don't we start with, I don't know, is there anything like specifically that like jumps out at you, like when he brought that up?
Well, the thing, I guess, with that, in regard to that, the thing that really stuck out to me was that the most indicative of whether or not you'll stick with a habit is you should focus on changing your identity, uh, like how you view yourself. But I think he was right. Most people focus on the outcome, and the thing that he brings up that's bad about that is, or setting like a goal, and I've actually experienced this. I don't know if you felt this the same way when you were running your half marathon. I remember when I was training for my half marathon, I was I was telling myself I'm running, like I'm training right now so I can run a half marathon.
Uh-huh.
And I hated like every minute of it.
Really?
Yeah, I hate
Interesting. Okay.
when I was done with the half marathon, I didn't I didn't run a lot after.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was sort of bringing up the point that when you set a goal, once the goal is over, like, well, for one, it's a very binary thing. You either succeed or you don't, which is
Uh-huh.
bad. And then once the goal is over, uh, you don't do it anymore. But he
Mhm.
was saying that if you change your identity, you associate with the habit way more. So if I were, instead of saying to myself, I want to run a half marathon, if I would have told myself I'm a runner, if I would have believed that I'm a runner, it would have become much easier to, one, go out after and run, and to keep up that, I guess, good habit, uh, that habit after.
Mhm.
On the same note, I don't feel like running was super conducive for like my style of exercise, just as a tangent unrelated to this book, because
Uh-huh.
run. I mean, I think you can kind of you can probably talk about this more than me. Like, just long distance running while you have to be in good shape for soccer is not the type of it is not the type of soccer shape you have, right? Like,
Mhm.
when you're playing soccer, it's more focused on, you know, same with pickleball now. It's more focused on like brief spurts of sprinting and not just ever ending like jogging.
Mhm.
But then the other thing in regards to that tree that he was mentioning is that building up systems to achieve a goal is much more fruitful on top of when you change your identity of reaching the goal than just purely motivating yourself. I think he was talking about how both people that are successful with things and people that aren't successful, everyone has goals. Or, I mean, not everyone. Most people have goals. But like, why do some people achieve those goals when others don't? And he was sort of arguing that the people that achieve the goals have good systems and processes in place of achieving the goals versus people that just have goals.
Mhm. Yeah, because, well, like a lot of people, like, I want to lose weight. It's like kind of hard to measure that. It's kind of hard. I mean, you could just jump on a scale, but it's not really at the core of what you're trying to improve. Like the identity shift is, I want to be a healthy person. So you should be somehow measuring how you're feeling in maybe in tandem with the weight. But he brought up the good point. Like someone, you ask them, do you want a cigarette? And then the person might say, no, I'm trying to quit. So that person that answered that question is still identifying as a smoker. Whereas if they just said, no, I don't want one. I'm, a healthy person, or yeah,
I'm not a smoker.
yeah, I'm not a smoker, basically. Um, so that just that little shift is important.
Or what, like sort of like to your I want to lose weight. One of the other things he talked about when you're making the processes and setting the goal, like, I mean, you should still have goals, but just like the statement, I want to lose weight, I think he would say is way too vague. So like when you're building up the processes for your habits, you want things to be hyper specific. It's like, you know, at 6 a.m. I will, you know, I will work out for 30 minutes, and then I will eat like a healthy breakfast consisting of a fruit bowl with like granola and yogurt. And then, from there, it's like that's a very tangible statement, right? Like if you put that down on paper, everyone will know exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah, he
Uh,
made a point of saying, you need to say when and where you're going to do something and what you're going to be doing. So yeah, like you said, like I will work out for, 30 minutes at the YMCA on this day, this time. What'd you think of the idea of habit stacking?
I loved
Like,
it. I actually started doing that.
yeah. So this is the idea of piggybacking a habit you want to do on top of something you already do. So you could just think like, okay, I'm gonna meditate for 10 minutes in my kitchen after I drink my cup of coffee or drink my matcha. So what are you trying to habit stack?
So I've now like a lot of times in the morning I would do the X3.
Uh-huh.
So from the X3, I've kind of now stacked my entire morning routine off of that. So uh, wake up, I wake up, usually wake up at 5 in the morning, just out of habit. And then instead of just lying in bed and watching TV for like an hour or two, I do the X3. I do like 30, 40 push-ups. Then I shower, brush my teeth, floss my teeth, drink mouthwash. Then I put on pants, and then I go to work.
Okay, sounds pretty good. Hopefully, you're not actually drinking the mouthwash now.
Well, right, yeah. I
I
mean,
I I
I
got
swig
you.
them. Yeah, yeah, I swig them.
I'm I'm messing with you. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I started intuitively. I think I kind of started doing this when I was studying for my actuarial exams. When I got in that funk, I was actually trying like running, like piggybacking. Like I would do something, um, like I would study and then run. Run would be like my like reward almost for studying, and I would just try to keep that up. But it was like study, run, and he brought up the idea like, but this is the idea of combining like something you want with something like you need to do. And he brought up this engineer guy that rigged his pedaling bike. Like if he wasn't pedaling fast enough, his Netflix would shut off. So I thought that was pretty clever. Trying to like combine something like you want to do, like the Netflix, with something you need to do with like exercise or biking. Um, so trying to make something like that a little more accessible
But
and
like, yeah, giving yourself a reward for
mhm.
doing something you should be doing.
Yeah.
Uh, just as sort of a side note, I think he where he talks about building good habits, I think he equally talks about breaking bad habits. And
Mm-hmm.
he brings up the example that if you increase your output, or if you increase your skill at something 1% every day, by the end of the day you'd be, I think he says, 37 times better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you decrease by 1% a day, you would be approaching zero. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess with that said, have you noticed any bad habits you have, and have you brought them?
Um, I definitely go to Starbucks, but the thing is, so like, and I when reading this, I did notice like this kind of goes back to the combining a reward with something like you need to do. Like in some ways, I view like getting like a chai and like sitting down, and right now we don't really have many chairs in our house, so like I get tired of standing, so I've been like the last couple months I developed this thing where I would also like get to the Starbucks at like 5 in the morning, because that's like the only thing open, and like knock out some of my work, like, and I kind of habit stack. I've kind of gotten into this groove of like I do mailings for land flipping, and then I do like 20 tweets to try to build a presence on Twitter, and then I do my land marketing all in sequence. But I piggybacked it with getting something at Starbucks, and that's probably not a good habit.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking maybe to, instead of going to Starbucks, now kind of rotate it to the point where, like, if I'm, because I also I don't want to spend extra money on unnecessary things when I also make very good beverages at home, like this chai or this
And good
matcha
matches.
frappuccino.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so now instead I'm thinking, so like every time I have the urge to go sit down at Starbucks and get something, whenever I can avoid buying something, maybe I'll put like $5 in a brokerage account, and maybe like it'll go towards buying like Starbucks stock or something, like something like that, to combat that, and make the reward, like make there be some reward attached, because he talks about you need some sort of reward, or some sort of instant gratification, because that's kind of how we as humans are wired. What about you? Have you developed any bad habits?
So after reading this, I noticed we give out at work, we get free Coke. Uh,
Coke?
Coke.
Really?
Yeah. So I've noticed that when I would start my day, like a lot of people, like since I don't drink coffee, a lot of people start their day by going to the break room, and they would like slowly have a coffee, and then kind of just through, I don't know, just sort of moving with the herd. I noticed I would start my day a lot of times by going to the break room, getting a Coke, and kind of like filtering through all my emails. I'm drinking a Coke.
Uh-huh.
Um, and like that was kind of like my cue. Like when I would come to work, I would have this whole routine that I would do through lab, like to get my like work ready for the day. And then as soon as I would finish that and I would get everything going, I would then like run to the break room, get a Coke, and then like read all my email.
Uh-huh.
And I like I became I think it became very obvious that that was happening. It also became very obvious that when I was like feeling bored at work, a lot of times I would go get one. Like I
Okay.
would feel like I like all my chemistry wasn't either one working, so like I had failures at work, or I had nothing in the lab to do. I would just go to the break room and get a drink. Uh, so I became very cognizant of that fact, and I am slowly. So I'm now trying to limit myself to how much I drink at work.
So do you have any tactics on how you're going about it, or?
Yeah, I've been drinking a lot more. I've been drinking a lot more water, and
Mhm.
especially cold water. Like cold water, I find to be more satiating than just normal water. Like,
Because I think he actually brought up an example. I think it was in a hospital where they had a lot of soft, like soda and stuff in the fridge. And he said they just ended up putting, I think, more and more water like everywhere, like water
yeah,
packages spread out throughout I think it was like a break room.
right.
And like the soda consumption immediately went down. So it's like make change your environment a little bit to the point where it's more accessible to have the good option. And vice
Right.
versa, and like the inverse, like
Right.
the things
Yes,
that are bad, try to hide away. So like he kept
right.
bringing up the point, like if you're worried about your TV consumption, like actually like unplug the TV and like put it in a closet. Like so then you're only going to take it out unless it in the cases where you really have an intent to watch something.
Yeah, so it's like the so he goes through like the four stages: is cue, craving, response, reward,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then like to build a good habit, things you want to do is you make it obvious. So sort of like what you were saying, you make something the good habit incredibly obvious to what you're doing, make it very attractive. So like make it look good, make it easy to do. I think making something easy to do is probably one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm.
Because when things like I don't know like about you, but I feel like most humans take the path of least resistance almost always. Like
Yep.
how many people like go out of their way to make things harder for them? It's not, yeah, and then make
But
it reward, and then yeah, make the habit rewarding. So like sort of what you were talking about when you're tethering something that you want to do with something that you need to do, you kind of get a reward for doing what you need to do. But then the inverse is to make it obvious is make it invisible. Like if you just sort of like with the TV, what you're saying, if you physically put the TV out of the room, you one don't see it, and then two, you make it hard. So like you take the TV back out of wherever you put it and reset it up. So I guess at the end of the day, is like if you then want to watch the TV, you really have to want to watch it. Like you have to really go out of your way to do it. And I think he brought up some statistics of like how less likely someone is to go to the gym based on the distances of how far away the gym was, like off their work path.
Uh-huh.
And it's like if the gym was right there, the likelihood of going to the gym was like pretty high. When you were like, 2 blocks out of the way, though, it became substantially lower, the likelihood that someone would then actually go.
Mm-hmm. And he also
Uh,
said like a lot of people just have like the decision that really pivots them is like just getting dressed. Like so if they had their gym clothes just laid out in an obvious place, it would trigger like, okay, now it's gym time. Put my gym clothes on and go.
yeah, that was sort of interesting to me. It's like the one, I think he was saying like your day is like built around, I guess like very small like micro decisions that like
Yep.
cue the rest of your day. Like yeah, like when you get home. Uh, so this is actually so I'm now like sort of so like I don't try. Uh, I like to come home at the very end of my day. And what I mean by that is like if I come home right after work, I know I'm usually going to pretty much lie on my couch, watch some TV, and probably fall asleep by like 8:30. Uh, but most days I like to leave from work to do whatever activity, and I do this most days, like whatever activity I'm going to do, which is usually training or playing pickleball. And then I get home usually at like, you know, 8:30 or 9, and then it's like, okay, I shower, I eat dinner, and then I just go to bed. So it's like my time at home is more or less the same. The thing that changes is just essentially like what time I get home. It's
Mm-hmm.
either if I get home right after work, I kind of do the exact same things that I do if I get home after playing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like, yeah, getting home just triggers me to pretty much like eat dinner, um, watch TV for like an hour and then take a shower and go to sleep.
Yeah. What did you think about so I mean the third, yeah, the make it easy law, it kind of made me think back to like reconnaissance man a little bit, like thinking about how environment plays such a big role. And I guess we didn't really, but like, yeah, how environment is sometimes more important than like motivation. And like if you're in an environment that's very conducive to like being active, it's easier to stay active. Like you look at people's fitness levels, like in Colorado versus like Michigan. I mean, or like Utah, it seems pretty like obvious that there's a difference in like the physical activity level. And I think it's just because it's a little more conducive to being outside and those types of people tend to move there. Um, I don't know.
So I
I,
guess I guess what I
mhm.
would say with that is when I lived in Tennessee, I mean it's sort of like I mean I think what is the was it the Darren Hardy book? What was that book called? You know what I'm talking about? The Darren Hardy book where he talks
Compound effect.
yeah.
Yep.
I think he talks in that book about like the 5 people you spend the most time with,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So it was sort of like I mean it's somewhat tangential, but I felt like when I lived in Tennessee, I would notice uh it seemed like the on like the health spectrum, I felt like people were either in insane shape or like morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
there wasn't a lot of, I don't know why I just thought of this, and it's somewhat unrelated to the topic at hand, but I didn't feel like there was a lot of like middle ground for just like average people. And it maybe just have been like the people I saw, but I just sort of thought of it
Mm-hmm.
from what you were just saying about Utah and Colorado and like the active lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, he makes a point of saying like, you need to find like cultures where like what you want to do is like the normal behavior. Um,
yes,
and
so
so
you get the results that you want,
yeah, exactly.
and you're
So
hanging out with people with similar goals. Uh, so sort of what you were saying about the environment. One of the notes I've written down is what did you think of this idea of priming the environment, of like making the space exactly how you want it for the activity that uh, that you want to accomplish there.
well, I kind of forget that phrase. Was that what he meant? Like when he would like clean a room before like the next use? I kind of forget what he meant by that.
Yeah, so like that was one, like let's say so one of the things he had was like if you want to like work out in your living room, you place everything out. Like
Ah,
you put your workout equipment in the living room, so you get the space ready for the activity that you want to do it. I think the other example he gave was if you want to make a healthy breakfast, you put out
ah,
put out the pots and
mhm.
pans, you put out the vegetables, the fruit, you put it in a conducive space for the activity that you want.
Yeah, I think, man, it seems like a pretty rational endeavor because he did say that, we like to make it easy. We're not trying to make it difficult on ourselves. And yeah, I see a lot of benefits in that. Do you have something specific to touch on there?
I mean, the only thing I could think of is like for the routine that I've now sort of adopted the past 3 or 4 days. I keep my before I just keep my X3 stuff out in front of my coffee table in front of my TV. So
Okay,
it's just
cool.
where it goes. And then it just becomes very easy to do it.
Mhm. Well,
And then
what'd you think of the like I like one part of this book is he talks about like here, let me see what chapter it was. It was chapter 11, walk slowly but never backward. And he went through the idea that, best is the enemy of good, and this idea of action versus just like I think he called it preparing or I forget, but basically one person is taking action and getting feedback, and then the other is kind of just preparing, reading, feeling like they're moving forward and making progress, but they're not really doing action. And he talks about this photography class where the photography teacher splits the students into two groups. One group is graded on quantity of photos, so like if they submit like 100 photos, I think they got an A. Whereas the other half was graded on quality. So like that one group was trying to just make that one good photo, and the quantity group was just trying to, just kick out picture after picture after picture. And the crazy thing was the quantity group ended up producing the better pictures. And I thought that was like such a good like experiment for like how life actually is. Like when you actually take action, you get more. It's kind of like if we look back at our episode one, like we had no outline, no feel for how the episode would go. We were kind of just really winging it, and now we wing it less, and perhaps the episodes are better.
So you brought up episode one there, but I immediately thought that when I read that I immediately thought that episode two there, the 50th law, when 50 Cent is talking about how you need the constant feedback. This is like the most trial and error example of all time of like how when you just experiment, like the tinkering, when you get like the
Mhm.
tinkering, you get uh, you sort of adopt and you see, not adopt, you adapt and you see what is good and what is bad. So you get a better
Yep.
feel. You get a better feel for like what is actually good,
Mhm.
uh, versus like sort of like what you're saying, just an abstract theoretical sense of like what may be good quality from the quality group, right?
Mhm.
But when you have the ability to just try more and more, you get a feel of actually doing it instead of just theoretically doing it. I think this is why it's like, it's so important for like why do people care about experience? Like hiring managers care about experience because you've done it and you experimented, uh, you know what's good. No one wants the surgeon working on them that is like their first surgery.
Yeah.
Everyone wants the surgeon that's been there for like 15 years and has done 1,000 surgeries.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. And that it goes to the point, like so, like maybe you felt like you were gonna miss a workout, and instead, just to keep like your streak of days alive, like you do like 10 push-ups. So like basically, like just doing something is better than nothing. So like just to keep the momentum going. So you don't have that compounding negative effect that you brought up earlier.
Right, and then the other thing he brought up was like one of the most important things is like don't sort of like what you said, don't break the streak. But he acknowledges that at some point, like life gets in the way and something will happen. But he says
Mhm.
never break the streak twice. So like if you miss something, one day, the next day you have to make sure you hit it so you can keep like you said, the momentum going and continue to get the sort of the compounding effects. I felt like this book was somewhat similar to that book, uh, at least in what I talked about,
Which one?
the compound effect.
The comment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. True, true. Yeah. And do you have, before we get, I guess, like, so we kind of got through the four parts essentially. Is there the part that I thought was the most fascinating though is when you get you gain some identity, but then what if that identity isn't helping you anymore? That's the part like I kind of grapple with. Like sometimes, and he brings up um like, if you say you're an athlete, and he was a baseball player, so if he identifies as an athlete and then he can't perform or play baseball anymore, like he's kind of having like this internal crisis where he talks about just reframing how he identifies, and says like, I said something like basically he's mentally and physically tough, instead of saying like I am an athlete. And like there's some things like that I'm going through right now. Well, like sometimes, like somehow I've come to like identify a little bit with like real estate, like that kind of being part of my nest. And I feel like if I sell anything, I'm almost like going against who I am, if that makes sense.
So
And
you're a real estate hoarder.
I don't know, like, but like I think I need to reframe it. Like I am interested in creative, like passive income, or yeah, some sort of equity, like
Uh,
downstream equity, where it's not so specific to real estate. So I don't need to be pigeonholed into just real, because now
I,
like
I
some of
think
the
it's more
yeah.
the more the passive income, right?
Mhm.
Because you're worried about selling your rentals, correct?
Right, but if they're not producing passive income anymore, then it's not going against my identity. Whereas before, like if you had a piece of property that was cash flowing at one time,
Mhm.
and you then you start identifying as I am a real estate investor, like real, yeah, and like I will, because of this original passive income, and then you kind of like start fighting yourself because maybe something in the environment's changed and it's not really cash flowing anymore.
Right, but
So
okay. So this is somewhat semantical, but what I'm saying is like you can be a real estate investor that never holds real estate. You can buy and flip. You can do a whole lot of things.
true, exactly.
So like what I'm saying is I think you're identifying more as someone exclusively with wanting passive income.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I guess that's kind of what
So
I'm.
I guess like if you would flip them, and I think it's probably because you've never bought and you've never sold an well, you've sold parcels of land, but you've never sold a house, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, if you reframed yourself as the total of I am a real estate investor instead of
Uh-huh.
feeling pigeonholed into passive income, do you think you would have an easier time letting go of your house?
Well, I think if I reframed it as I want passive income, then it would be easier. If I started having a property that wasn't producing like it should, like I thought it would, because then it's like easier to just chop the lot like losses. Like let's go on to the next thing. For some reason, I'm having trouble like making a decision one way or another on some of my current properties because it's kind of been a little turbulent the last couple of years. Um, and I feel like I went through a similar thing. Like I very much identified as a soccer player growing up, and
Yeah.
that was like tough when you don't really um, play or you can't really run the way I once could. Um,
Do you
but
ever
yeah.
feel like you've identified as an actuary?
So that was another thing I actually wrote down. And so, but the thing about that is, um, I think it was more of like a loose connection. I never really, I liked, or I liked the idea of just the continual learning part, I think. And I didn't identify as much as being an actuary. So that I think it would be easier to just let go of if I wanted to, because I didn't really identify with it to begin with. Another very interesting one and one that really like gets me going or like uncomfortable is like being American. I very much identify as being American, but and this might go with kind of like reconnaissance man or like the nomad capitalist. Like if at some point it felt like it wasn't serving me, would it be tough to not be American? And yes, it would. So like that's another thing that's like pretty ingrained in my identity that at some point it might not serve us because there were people that were all about the USSR, and then they had to make a change because it wasn't serving me.
Yeah.
So
How much of, I guess it's sort of interesting because how much of that do you think has to do with the fact you married a non-American?
I think it is influenced by that because it has opened my eyes a little bit to how other places are operating. I just it's not necessarily saying that I think there are better places, but there are places that operate differently and there's different ways of living. And if at some point down the road I didn't think being American served me, that would be a tough decision.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, the reason I asked that is because like once you say it, like I'm like, yeah, well, obviously I identify as an American, but I would have never. I guess I would have never thought of like I would have never like internally said I identify as an American, like, but
uh-huh.
maybe that's because we live in America, but like once you said it, it's like painfully obvious that yes, obviously I do this.
Mhm. But the thing about that is it's not something we actively
True,
participated or chose to
right?
to do. Whereas like, if you say, I'm not a smoker, like I mean that's active decision or being active, healthy, musician, all those things are active choices, whereas this we were kind of born into. So yeah.
I think with the identity thing, I actually recently got into a somewhat of a. I mean, it would have been probably a couple months ago when someone was complaining about how much like I played pickleball,
Uh-huh.
uh, and the statement that was made was something along the lines of like you spend like just this. I don't think the word silly was actually said, but the intonation of the word sort of implied like you spend so much time doing this silly hobby. And like I actually like somewhat felt offended. I was like, it's not like in my mind, I'm like, this is not a silly hobby. Like
Uh-huh.
it's like, yes, this is a like large part of my identity. I very much identify as this is like part of a core part of my life now.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, if it's in like sort of the counter argument, well, it's like you don't make money from it. If it's not a hobby, how would you describe it? And like, I don't know, I didn't have a good way of like how to put it. I didn't have a good way of like how to put it into words of like how I defined its relationship with me. But like, I do feel like after sort of reading this book, I do feel like, yeah, identity, part of my identity is a good way to think of it. Uh, just as like a core part of myself of like what I do. I mean, almost all of my traveling now revolves around it. So
Mhm.
I would say that's a core part of my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any other tidbits?
mm, I don't think so, really. I don't know. What about you? Any other?
One of the only other things I've written down is one room, one purpose, which
Okay, I like that one. Yeah.
yeah, sort of just like a general mantra of like uh like two people can see a living room and they can view it in a different way. Like one person can view the room like the living room as a place to, I think the example he uses is lay on the couch, eat pizza, and watch Netflix. And then the other person could view the living room as a place to lay on the couch and just read for an hour every day. And it's like it becomes easier to complete a habit if you have a designated place for that habit to take place. So if one of your goals is to, read more or like read for an hour a day, have a designated, he just viewed like have a designated place in your house or your apartment where you're going to complete that. So, if you want to read in a study, like just have the books out in the study and then go into the study, it's going to be very easy to just sort of get into the zone and read. Um,
Yeah, I like that advice, especially since like he described like how he used to do work at like the kitchen island and the living room. And then like internally, like if he was in the kitchen, he's like, wait, should I be checking emails? Like so he was having a hard time decompartmentalizing like his work from his personal life. So I kind of like having, yeah, I like that. I like that piece of advice.
yeah, I think people that work from home have a harder time with this than
Yeah.
I don't really ever work from home, so I don't really have so like decompartmentalizing like work from home time has never been an issue for me, at least in my outside of graduate school, because like once I get home, I'm home. Like I'm not
Uh-huh.
doing I can't do lab work at home.
Yeah.
I could do some paperwork, but I'm not going to.
Yeah. I remember
Uh,
when COVID first started, I had a problem with this, and everyone on my team kind of shared the same thoughts that we were actually working more than we had worked when we were in the office. Like it was just like, yeah, because there's like no separation between like home and work.
yeah,
So
I
then you
heard,
kind of have to create these like artificial boundaries or right physical boundaries.
yeah, I heard that was I heard that common sentiment from a lot of people that did work from home when COVID
Yeah.
hit.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, well, I think Jack, if we got nothing left, no other thoughts, you want to take us out?
sure. So please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind, a great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. I am out. I am Jack Allwild. I just said your name, Al. It's so early. I'm Jack Allwild. With me, as always, is my brother Alex Allwild. Al, what are we doing next time?
The next book we're doing is called Enjoy the Decline by one of our, I guess, now favorite authors, Aaron Clary. And I think Aaron's going to actually be on this time, right?
Yeah. But hell, you gave it away. I thought we were going to do a book draft too, man.
Oh, well, right. We also are doing the book draft.
Yeah. But cool. We've given the listeners a sneak peek into what the draft will have. So until next time.
All right. Later.